I want to paint you guys a scenario. Let me know if this resonates with you guys, because I have a feeling that this at one point or another has happened to a lot of people. And it's one of the reasons why I'm making this series talking about monomorphic species. So I want you to picture this. Imagine that you were going to maybe your first bird show, or maybe you just ordered your first pair of birds online. And you had no idea that the pair of birds that you picked were monomorphic. For those that don't know, birds fall into two different types of categories. They're either dimorphic or they're monomorphic. Species that are dimorphic are species that are very easily distinguishable, meaning the males and the females, very easy to know which one's which just by looking at them. Monomorphic species, on the other hand, are species that look identical. So let's say you're going to that first bird show and you get to the cage filled with birds and you have $200 in your pocket. Each one of those birds cost $100, so you can buy a pair. How do you know you're going to end up with a pair? Because God knows if you pick them wrong and you end up with two males or two females, your chances at breeding end there. I mean, until you're able to scrape up some more money, you're not going to be able to find the appropriate sex for the ones that you've bought. So you have one shot at this and you have to pick correctly. I feel like a lot of people go through this scenario, or maybe it was just me, who knows? Because I remember when I first got into this hobby, I was, a little bit low on cash and I was maybe spending more than I should on birds. After all, this is an addiction. We listen, we don't judge. I'm not going to judge you guys don't judge me. You all know how addictive this hobby can be. So sometimes we spend money buying a pair of birds that maybe we should have spent paying some bills. It happens. It happens. But regardless, listen, I understand the struggle of something like that. I know how important it is to end up with a true pair, because at the end of the day, like I said in the previous video, we all want the same thing, which is when we buy a pair of birds, we eventually want to end up with eggs in the nest. We eventually want those eggs to hatch and to have chicks, and eventually see those offsprings jump out of the nest and start eating on their own and eventually continue that process. So I know how important it is to end up with a male and female at the beginning, so that you don't lose that hope, or you don't lose that love that you have for this hobby. Because I feel like a lot of people in the beginning, unfortunately, they jump into something without knowing. They end up with a species that is monomorphic. They end up with two males, two females. They never lay eggs for them. They never hatch any chicks. They get disappointed within a couple of months and end up completely leaving the hobby. So this is the reason why I started these videos talking about these monomorphic species and how it is that you can see these subtle little differences between the males and the females, so that you're able to pick correctly. Or hopefully if you order online, you're ordering from somebody who knows how to distinguish these differences, and they end up sending you a true pair so that you don't go through these problems. In last week's video, we talked about 4 different species, and if you missed that, you're gonna have to go back through my videos and find it. But we talked about the diamond firetails, we talked about the red-throat parrotfinches, the blue-faced parrotfinches, and the orange cheek waxbills. And in today's video, we're going to cover 4 more species of finches, or actually 3 species of finches. The other ones are canaries. So we're going to go and dive into the Massgrassfinches. We're going to take a look at the lavender waxbills. We'll also take a look at the Alfinches, and last but not least, the canaries. And hopefully by the end of this video, you're going to be able to tell or see these subtle little differences between the sexes, so that when it is your turn to go out and buy these birds and pick them in person, and you have a cage in front of you with 10 birds, you're able to identify males from females and eventually end up with a true pair. First on the list, we have the Alfinches. Alfinches are monomorphic. They're very difficult to distinguish between the sexes. Some people have caught on. They've learned these subtle little differences between males and females. Others still have a lot to learn. Like I said in the previous videos, one of the best ways that you can learn these differences quicker would be if you have multiple birds in front of you. It's not the same when you only have 2 birds and you're looking at them and you're like, man, both of these things look identical, versus if you have a cage with 5 to 10 birds. Now you're able to distinguish these differences a little bit easier, because chances are you're gonna have the perfect example of a male in there and the perfect example of a female in there, and then you can compare those 2 to the rest of them and eventually sex all of the ones that you have. But for Alfinches, there are a couple of different ways to visually sex them and also audibly. sex them. I don't even know if that makes sense, but they do make distinct noises, or at least the males do, where once you hear that, you're gonna be like, okay, I have a male there. But let's start with the visual clues. For the Alfinches, we wanna look at the top of the head and we want to look at their vent. Those are the two main visual clues that I use in order to sex the difference between the males and the females. There are people that look at the chest bar. I try to stay away from that because unfortunately I've had females with thick chest bars that break in the middle, or that are, you know, they don't break in the middle, I'm sorry. And I've had males that have thin chest bars. Again, it's all relative. You can have some birds that are females that look like males and are males that look like females, but it all depends on the age of the bird as well. And there's so many factors, but generally speaking, when you look at these Alfinches and you look at the top of the head, here you're gonna see the perfect example of them. We're gonna notice that the males have the black on the top of the head has a straight line. Now that straight line does not break. It's very solid. It is very easy to look at it and say, okay, this has to be the male. When you compare it to the female, the line on top of her head where that black is at, it's not straight. It usually makes a V shape, or in some cases it may be straight, but it is very short. It's not as thick as the males. So it's not gonna be as big, and that is one of the best and easiest ways of telling the difference between the two sexes on the owls. Now, if we flip them over and we look at their vents, the vent is another great area to look at to distinguish between the males and the females, because the males, their vent is going to be darker in color, and it's also going to be larger compared to the females. The female's vent is going to be dark, but it's going to be smaller. The black does not extend as far up into the belly as it does on the male. Another clue that we have for the Alfinches is their vocalizations. The males have this amazing little song. I don't know how to explain it. Man, I wish I had a recording of one of them. I'll try to look for a recording of a Alfinch male song and I'll link it into this video. But they almost sound like, I don't know how to explain it. They sound like a gun, like an alien gun. A futuristic alien gun. I sound like I'm at the mechanic shop trying to explain to the mechanic the noise that my car is making and why it's breaking down. So the Alfinches, they sound like that. The males will perk up. They'll grab a piece of nesting material in the tip of their beak and they won't shut up. That is the noise that they're gonna make over and over again. The females will not do this. So if you have one of them making this noise, 100% it's a male. The females, they'll make more of like a meow noise, like me, me. They have these little meows that they do. They're very weird. But that's another way of telling the difference between males and females. The males will sing. The females will only make these short little calls. And we saw that when I was explaining in last week's videos about the parrotfinches. You got a chance to hear the male song versus the female short calls. And in most bird species, that's gonna be the case. The male's gonna have his courtship song, which he accompanies with a beautiful display of dancing. And then the female, she's just gonna have her short little chatters and calls here and there, but not a long song. Moving on to our second species on the list, we're going to talk about the Masgrassfinches. This is another monomorphic species that gives a lot of people a hard time when it comes to sexing them. Why? Because males and females are basically identical. But just like the Alfinches, one of the very first things that we're going to focus on is their song. The Masgrassfinches, the males, they won't be quiet. These males, especially during the breeding season, they're gonna be very vocal, especially early on in the morning and in the late evenings. So if you get a chance to look at your birds early in the morning, as soon as the aviary lights come on or as soon as the sun comes up, this is gonna be your best shot at figuring out which one is male and which one is female. Why? Because the males are gonna be singing, they're happy, it's morning, the sun's up, and it's time to get the day started. The males have a very unique call, which I'm gonna go ahead and place in the video here so you guys can have a chance to see what it sounds like. On the other hand, the females, they don't have any songs, they just have very short calls. Same as with the Alfinches. Now, when it comes time to visually sex these two, these can be very hard. Very, very hard. Why? Because the visual clues are practically just not there. It is so much more difficult to visually sex these guys than it is to visually sex red throats or blue face or Alfinches. I would consider these more like the diamond firetails. It's one of those things where visually it can be very frustrating to sex them. Now, there is one small little clue that I use to sex these guys, and I was taught this years ago when I first got into the hobby by an old-time breeder, and he told me, look at the belt around their belly. The Masgrassfinches have this beautiful black belt that comes from the side of their flanks, and it extends down towards their belly, or almost touching at the center of the belly. In the females, you're going to notice that that black flank, or those black stripes that they have on the side, they don't really touch, or they don't meet too much or too far down into the belly. They kind of stay about halfway up. But in the males, you're going to notice that that black extends deeper into the belly. I don't want to say it touches because it will never touch on the belly. The gap, though, between those two flanks, or between those two black stripes, is a lot smaller on the male than it is on the female. So it makes it look like his belt is bigger. Once I learned this, it was a game changer. I finally started hatching Massgrassfinches, but prior to knowing this, I had the hardest time. Why? Because for some reason, same as with the diamond firetails, I would always end up with a lot of females. So when I first went down to Miami to the quarantine to grab these Massgrassfinches, when I first started breeding them way back in the day, I remember I brought a small lot of them, which is usually what I do anytime that I work with monomorphic species. You don't want to just buy two. If you have the funds and you have the ability to buy more than two, man, do it. Why? Because the chances of you ending up with a male and female on your first try are very unlikely. So I go down there and I buy 6 birds. I'm hoping, hey, listen, I bought 6 of them. One of them has to be a male. One of them has to be a female. I bring them back home. I'm listening for the first couple days, waiting to hear the song, because I know at this point I didn't know about the flanks and how that black stripe on the male is bigger than it is on the female. All I knew is that the males sing, the females don't. So I'm waiting. First day, I'm looking at them. They're going through quarantine. And what I did was, which this is a great advice or great tip for you guys, if you have a big number of them like this, let's say you have 5, 6, 7, 8 birds, you grab each bird and you put a color leg band on each bird. Make sure that it's a different color, so blue, red, yellow, green, purple, whatever. And you throw them all in the cage, and from a distance now, I'm looking at these birds and I'm looking at their colored leg bands, because I want to be able to know and see, okay, the blue one is singing, that's a male. The red one is singing, that has to be a female, and little by little, start sexing them this way. So I'm looking at them and nobody's singing. Next day, nobody's singing. Day after that, nobody's singing. Well, to make the story short, about a month passes. I have yet to hear a song from these 6 Massgrassfinches. So I thought, you know what? I must have grabbed all females. No other ifs, ands, or buts. I mean, you can't go around that. If they're not singing, they have to be females. And sure enough, I was right. I ended up going down to Miami, ended up picking 3 more birds. And luckily, 2 of them ended up being males, and that's how I was able to start my line of Massgrassfinches. So that's how it happened at the beginning. Eventually, I figured out later on when I talked to that old timer about the Massgrassfinches and how much of a hard time they were giving me, and he taught me, hey, listen, once you have chicks, start to look at their flanks, look at those black stripes. The males will have longer stripes, the females are shorter, etc., etc. That was a game changer. So hopefully that tip helps you guys if you're breeding or working with Massgrassfinches, which, let me tell you, there are species that right now are not easy to find. They've been around for a long time, but it's not a species that a lot of people work with. And unfortunately, little by little, they've been disappearing. So if you are working with this species, don't let them go. Keep going forward, and hopefully this tip helps you. Next, we're going to be talking about the Lavender Waxbill. This is a beautiful species that is from Africa. It's a species that requires a lot of attention, especially nowadays, especially after COVID. Quarantines stopped, so unfortunately, we have no longer been receiving imports from Africa, and that means that these birds are very hard to find, They are also very hard to breed. So if you have some and you don't know exactly which one is male and which one is female, hopefully this is a game changer for you guys. The best tip that I have for the lavender waxbills, unfortunately, is their calls. I'm gonna go ahead and play some vocalization calls for you guys here so that you can kind of understand the difference between the males and the females. If you do, or if you are working with lavenders and you're not sure what it is that you have, try to play these calls for them to see if your birds respond, how it is that they respond. And if you do have a male, hopefully he starts to sing, and you can see that. If you have a female, maybe she'll do her short little calls back and forth, and you'll be able to tell that then you have a female, and so on and so forth. As far as it goes visually, the lavenders don't have any visual clues as to which one is male and which one is female. And trust me guys when I tell you that I have looked at these birds from tip to toe, and I have never been able to spot any visual differences between them. I've tried to compare their head size, I've tried to compare their feet coloration, their body coloration, how it looks on their vent, how they look on their back, on their sides, their wings, underneath their feathers. I mean, I've looked everywhere to see if I can distinguish any characteristics between the males and the females, and unfortunately I can't. They look identical. So this is one of those species where if you are working with them, since they are so hard to find, and you have a couple and you're not sure what it is that you have, DNA sex them. Do some DNA, do some feather blood work on them, try to figure out which are males, which are females. Another possibility that you have, which is what I used to do here at the beginning when I had no idea which was which, is I would throw them into the outdoor aviary and I would just colony breed. I would throw 6, 7, 8 birds out there and I would pray for the best. There's nothing else that you can do but wait and hope that out of everything that you threw in there, at least 1 or 2 will pair up and end up giving you chicks. But if that's not the case, if you only have 2 birds and you want to try to figure out what it is that you have, again, try to play these songs back and forth to them. You've already heard what the male sounds like. You kind of got an idea what the female sounds like from looking at this video. So play that, see how your birds respond, and hopefully you have a pair. And if you do, hopefully they end up giving you chicks, because like I said, this is a species that desperately needs our help here in the US. All right guys, now moving on to the last one. I know it's not a finch, but it is a bird that a lot of people get into when they're first starting in this hobby. It's a bird that has been around since forever. It's probably one of the very first caged birds that existed, and that is the canary. The canary is a beautiful bird. A lot of people keep them because of their beautiful song, but a lot of people have a hard time sexing the males from the females. Why? Because again, the species is monomorphic. They both look identical. And same as with the diamond firetails, this is a species that doesn't really have strong visual clues as to which is male and which is female, unless you're in the breeding season. In the breeding season, you're going to be able to tell the difference right away. Why? Because the males are not going to stop singing. The males will sing 24/7, especially if they're being kept alone. Another clue that you have as to whether it's male or female is by flipping them upside down and looking at their vent. On the males, when you look at the vent and you blow the feathers out of the way, you're going to notice that he is going to have a little, you know what I mean. And if it's a female, it's not going to poke out like that. If it's a female, the vent is going to be a little bit more ovalish. So you're going to be able to tell right away when you look at them this way, because you blow on those feathers, you move it out of the way. The female is going to be flat and oval, while the male is going to have this little tiny thing that protrudes out and it kind of pokes out. And that's his little dingling. That's what he uses to mate during the breeding season. It becomes enlarged, or becomes a little bit swollen. And that's how he is able to breed with the female once he mounts her. All right, guys, so that's going to be the end of part 2 for monomorphic species. I'll probably end up making a part 3. I'm only trying to talk about species that I keep and that I breed and that I have experience with. I know that some of you guys are probably going to ask me like, hey, how do you sex Japanese white eyes, or how do you sex this and that? Listen, guys, I don't know how to visually sex all of them. I'll give you the example. I just mentioned the Japanese white eyes. To this day, I think it was in 2020 or 2021, 22, I can't remember when it was. I ordered from California 8 Japanese white-eyes. I put them inside of that outdoor aviary. I made a video showing you guys how difficult it was to keep these birds alive because apparently the birds that they sent me were wild caught. They were not domesticated birds. So a couple of them ended up dying and only 3 or 4 of them survived. They're still in that outdoor aviary. I haven't had the slightest idea which one is the male. I have no idea which one's the female. They have never bred. They have never built a nest. They have never laid any eggs. For all I know, they're all males. They're all females. There may be pairs. I just don't know how to breed them and so on. So I know that there's probably a lot of birds that you guys want me to do this series on and explain how to tell the difference between males and females if they are monomorphic, but I can only speak from my experience with the ones that I have bred, with the ones where I've had success noticing these small little subtle clues as to which is which. Other than that, I can't help you guys out with all these other weird ones where I may not know what exactly it is that they are. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed this video. Hopefully the species that we did talk about, you guys are able to now tell the difference. So if you do go to a bird show and you are looking at a cage filled with 10, 15 birds, you have a little bit of an idea at least what to look for now. Like always, if you've enjoyed the video, thumbs up, like, subscribe, you know the deal. We'll see each other in the next one. Bye.